Hello, hello, ladies. On influence youth today, young teen, mature teenagers, young adults, mature adults, OAPs. It's good to keep our mind occupied. Broaden our horizon. Maybe you want to get into further education. Maybe you want to get a better career, or maybe your career you're in, you need the foundations to get better money. So we're going to work hard. We're going to get a pen, highlight any words that we need to know the meaning of. Highlight the words that we need to know the meaning of. Reference our reading on page 86. Unit 4, Ireland and the Famine. Looking at the percentage of Irish born living abroad in the late 19th century from Crowley. North America, there's quite a lot, 63%. Canada, 5%. Scotland, 6%. England, Wales, 15%. South Africa, 0.4. Australia, 7. New Zealand, 1.6. The impact of the Irish emigrants was significant in towns such as Boston and New York. Indeed, by 1855, Irish-born people made up 1/3 of the population of the latter city. Irish immigrants also travelled even further afield. For instance, approximately 70,000 Irish famine victims migrated to the British colony of Australia between 1845 and 1855, followed by a further 175,000 Irish immigrants in a decade that followed, significantly increasing the colony's small population of Europe settlers, and as the bulk of Irish immigrants were Roman Catholic, alerting its religious profile. Crowley et al. 2013, page 550. Many more Irish people moved to other parts of the United Kingdom. Between a quarter and a third of a million Irish people ended up in Liverpool, Glasgow, London, and other British cities. Crowley et al. 2013. Even the short trip to Britain had its perils, particularly for those who could afford only passage on deck. One eyewitness, Julius Besnard, gave account of the immigrants arriving in Liverpool. No language at my command can describe the scenes I have witnessed there. The people were positively prostrated from the inclemency of the weather, seasick all the way, drenched from the sea and rain, suffering from cold at night, deliberated, scarcely able to walk after they go out of the steamers. In fact, I consider the manner in which passengers are conveyed from Irish to English ports disgraceful, dangerous, and inhuman. Figure 9.7, Unknown artists, Irish immigrants. The recent collision on the Mersey, engraved in the Pictorial Times, 6th of June 1846. Look and Learn, illustrated papers collection. Bridgeman Images, immigrants faced all sorts of difficulties in their journeys. This engraving depicts Irish passengers on board a ship, but delayed in their departure for America from Liverpool following a collision on the River Mersey with another ship. For many passengers, Liverpool was merely a stop on a longer journey to North America by sailing ship, although even this might not be straightforward, as figure 9.7 shows. However, plenty of Irish people remained in the city. Pre-famine Irish emigration to Liverpool meant that in 1841, Irish-born people accounted for some 70% of the population. But by 1851, this figure stood at over 22%. The sudden surge of famine immigrants to Liverpool in the 1840s, destitute and in very poor condition, put a strain on the city's resources. If we turn to reading 9.5, extract from the Times, 2nd of April 1847, reading 9.6, extract from the Liverpool Mail, 6th November 1847, reading 9.7, extract from Liverpool Mercy, 1st of August 1848, and reading 9.8, extract from Herald, 17th of November 1855. These are located at the end of the unit. The extracts are drawn from a variety of contemporary newspapers. and all of them addressed the issue of Irish emigration to Liverpool. As you read through these brief extracts, try to identify some of the main complaints made against, and some of the key characteristics attributed to the Irish immigrants. It's going to take around about 20 minutes. A specimen answer. Various complaints are made about the Irish, specifically that they are making Liverpool unhealthy and bringing disease. They are putting a strain on services and inhabitants due to the cost of caring for them. They are poor and improvised, and they are beggars. Some of the complaints addressed that they were thought to be inherent Irish characteristics. Aside from being associated with disease, death, and dirt, the Irish are described as inferior, slothful, improvident, reckless, drunken, obscene, savages, and criminals. They are also described as Celts. Irish famine immigrants did put a strain on Liverpool's resources. They crowded into poor accommodation close to the docks. Disease spread as quarantine stations and fever sheds were put in place along the River Mersey. Those who did not find employment placed an increased burden on the public works. The cost of these measures was reflected in increased levies on ratepayers. It is notable here, however, that negative responses to the Irish immigrants were also informed by long-standing stereotypes that held the Irish were uncivilized, lazy, indigent, drunkards. The extent to which racial prejudice influenced anti-Irish sentiment in Britain is an issue debated by historians. Paz, 1992. However, there is a hint in these extracts that emerging new ideas about race, and specifically the idea that certain races of people were more advanced and therefore superior to others. Where influence attitudes to the Irish terms, such as a Celt, were sometimes used by contemporaries to distinguish the inferior Irish from the superior English or Saxons. In the case of Liverpool, these negative attitudes had significant consequences. Some 15,000 people were deported back to Ireland in 1847, to the point at which, as one historian has put it, sympathy in Liverpool for these people had effectively run out. In Crowley et al. 2013. Liverpool was not the only British city impacted by famine and immigration. Irish immigrants settled in South Wales, in London, and industrial towns of the north of England, including the infamous Little Island ghetto in Manchester. Scotland was also a popular destination for Irish famine victims, for instance. Approximately 100,000 Irish people arrived in Glasgow area during the famine years. By 1851, almost 20% of the city's population was Irish born. Crowley et al. 2013, page 516. Of course, famine in the Scottish Highlands had also seen significant migration to lowland areas of the country, as was the experience in Liverpool. New arrivals from Ireland and the Highlands were in poor condition and placed a strain on medical and welfare systems. In the years that followed the famine, the Irish tended to be preserved as a social problem. Wherever they settled in Britain, this is due, in large part, to the low social status. Figure 9.8, showing an Irish pauper and another drunk, while the children beg an indifferent passerby for alms. The vast majority of the Irish famine refugees to Britain had come from rural areas, were illiterate, and had few skills suitable to find employment in Britain's industrial cities. The work that they did find tended to be low paid and unskilled. For this reason, the Irish were seen to lower wages and pose a threat to British jobs. Some with the necessary skills worked as artisans, some as servants, and many joined the army. By the mid-Victorian period, some 30% of the army were Irish. A small minority of immigrants even successfully assimilated into the ranks of the middle classes. Overall, the status of Irish immigrants in Britain improved only very gradually over the remainder of the century. Swift, 1987. Political implications. Walter Howe Deverell, The Irish Vagrants, 1853 to 54, oil on canvas, Josenberg Art Gallery. Politic implications. Assessing the political impact of the famine is a difficult task. When Queen Victoria conducted her first official visit to Ireland in 1849, when the effects of the famine were still very much being felt, she received a rapturous welcome. She landed at Cobbin in County Cork, promptly renamed Queenstown, in her honour, and thereafter visited Cork City, Waterford, and Dublin. As she noted in her diary at Dublin, it was a wonderful, striking scene, such masses of human beings so enthusiastic, so excited, and yet such perfect order maintained then. The numbers of troops and the different bands stationed at certain distances, the waving of hats and handkerchiefs, the burst of welcome that rent the air, all of which made it never made it a never to be forgotten scene, particularly when one reflects on what state the country was in quite lately. Whatever these scenes were evidence of Irish loyalty to the British monarch or simply the response of curious crowds to the pageantry of the royal visit is open to debate. The future relationship between Britain and Ireland was certainly not clear to contemporaries at this time. As you know from your work in Unit 6, Irish nationalist sentiment had already been evident in 1820s to 1830s. In the mass political movements led by Daniel O'Connell, 1775-1847, calling for Catholic emancipation and the repeal of the Act of Union, in the years that followed, repeal remained high on the political agenda, while other movements such as trade, unionism, and Chartism made little headway in the country. Electoral support for the repeal movement had dipped somewhat in the years before the famine, as O'Connell reigned in political agitation in order to cooperate with the Whig Party in the British Parliament. However, while the famine can be seen to have temporarily bolstered support for the cause of repeal, by 1847, a significant split in the movement had emerged, growing increasingly impatient in the Repeal Association's progress. A group of romantic nationalists known as the Young Islanders had come to advocate an all-embracing, non-denominational nationalism, a concept articulated to the public through their organ. The Nation newspaper, Jackson 2, 2014, page 541, by the summer of 1847. O'Connell was growing fearful that the Young Islanders had come to advocate military conflict to achieve self-rule for Ireland, and he pressured for the Repeal Association to adopt a set of peace resolutions, precluding the organisation involvement in any form of armed conflict. Thomas Francis Meagher, 1823 to 1867, one of the founders of the nation and a prominent young Islander, gave a speech on 28th of July 1846 at Consolation Hall, headquarters of the Repeal Association, explaining his reasons for dissenting from the peace resolutions. Once Meagher had delivered his speech, he and the Young Islanders departed the hall and left the Repeal Association permanently. Turning to reading 9.1, extract from a speech Thomas Francis Meagher at Consolation Hall, 28th of July 1846, located at the end of the unit. After he had read this, answer the questions below. It will be helpful for you to know that towards the end of the reading, Meagher makes reference to several democratic revolutions. Tyrolene Rebellion 1809, the American Revolution 1765 and 83, and the Belgian Revolution 1830 to 31. Does Meagher advocate Irish people taking to arms in order to bring about repeal of the Act of Union? What are his reasons for this stance? Why does he refuse to endorse the peace resolutions? No, he says that taking to arms would be senseless and wicked, and the attempt would be a decided failure. He argues that organising and voting are the only weapons that they can employ to achieve reappeal, and the methods most likely to succeed. Mega refuses to endorse the peace resolutions because he does not repudiate the use of physical force in all circumstances and countries. He argues that violence is warranted for the defence and assertion of a nation's liberty, and he cites America and Belgium as examples of this. Not long after the incident of Consolation Hall, O'Connell died while on pilgrimage to Rome, leaving the Reappeal Association in disarray. Meanwhile, the young islanders had formed a new organisation, the Irish Confederation, with the aim of attaining a national parliament for Ireland. While the group initially sought to pursue this agenda through peaceful means, as Meagher suggests here, ultimately the 1848 Republican Revolution in Paris, Berlin, Vienna, Rome, Prague, and Budapest inspired the young islanders to take more revolutionary republic stance. Just as the Chartist movement split into moral and physical force factions, so too did the Irish nationalist movement. This division between those who sought to further the cause of liberty or the nation through peaceful constitutional means and those willing to pursue a more radical revolutionary republican agenda would endure throughout the period you will study in the rest of this module. In September 1848, the young islanders staged a short-lived and unpopular rebellion against the British rule. Afterwards, some of their leaders were arrested and sentenced to deportation. Other young islanders, notably James Stephens, 1842-1901, and John O'Mahony, 1815-1877, fled to Europe. In Paris, both men made plans to further the cause of an independent democratic Irish republic. O'Mahony travelled to North America and founded the Fenian Brotherhood, and Stephens went back to Ireland to organise support for its sister's organisation, the Irish Republican Brotherhood. Irish immigrants in North America joined the Fenians and other Irish fraternal organisations. In significant numbers, many had already been politicised before leaving their homeland due to their exposure to the campaigns for Catholic emancipation and repeal of the Act of Union. Furthermore, as the historians Kirby Miller has observed, many Irish immigrants saw their situation in terms of their involuntary exile, brought about as a result of the actions and inactions of the British government. Miller 2008. Other common immigrant experiences may also have had a role to play in the decision to join the Fenians, including homesickness, linguistic barriers, and difficulties adapting to work in cities and factories. Indeed, it has been suggested that organisations such as the Fenians may have helped immigrants to acclimatise to their new circumstances, to form a coherent community, and to improve their status in society. Lynch 2009. Whatever the reason for their interest in the Fenians, the financial support that Irish immigrants in South America provided for the organisation was of great significance to the nationalist movement in Ireland in the years that followed. In contrast to the Fenians in North America, was widely advertised for activities. The IRB, typically also referred to contemporaries as Fenians, remained a relatively small secret oath-bound body, organised along military lines and led by a 11-man Supreme Council. The organisation come to have a membership of over 60,000 people throughout its 7 districts. The 4 provinces of Ireland, as well as Scotland, North England and Southern England, Bartlett 2010. Overall, the Fenian movement gave a focus to the new part, more violent form of Irish nationalism that emerged in the decades after the famine. In March 1867, with the assistance of funds gathered in North America, IRB members staged an ill-fated rebellion against British rule in the area around Dublin known as 1867 Fenian Rising. In the months that followed, the IRB was also active in Britain, notably in September 1867. a police van in Manchester was attacked in order to free the IRB members. And in its process, a police officer was killed. As a result, three of the Fenians involved were executed by hanging, while Manchester's outrages caused a wave of anti-Irish hysteria. In Britain, the conduct of the trial and execution of three Manchester martyrs caused outrage in Irish communities around the world. IRB violence in Britain continued in months that followed the event in September 1860. Although the IRB was not acting on behalf of the majority of the people who live in Ireland, its campaign of violence had some important repercussions in the longer term. Isaac Butt, 1813 to 1879, a Protestant Conservative MP and barrister who had defended the Fenian leaders of the 1867 rising in Dublin, was motivated by the violence to create a moderate nationalist movement. To this end, in 1870, he founded the Home Government Association, later to become known as the Home Rule League and Irish Parliamentary Party. The aim of these organisations was to attain a parliament for Ireland, or Home Rule, by constitutional means. At the same time, some Liberal politicians, most notably perhaps William Gladstone, become convinced that in order to prevent further nationalist violence, it was necessary to undermine the use of physical force as by means to redress Irish grievances. Lynch 2009. After becoming Prime Minister in 1868, Gladstone famously declared, "My mission is to pacify Ireland." Matthew 2004. Ultimately, Gladstone would preside over the introduction of legislation that attempted to address many Irish grievances, including an act to disestablish the Church of Ireland 1869, the first Irish Land Act 1870, and the first Home Rule Bill 1886. Meanwhile, the Home Rule movement had a significant impact on British parliamentary politics. You examine both of these issues in more detail in Block 3. As you have seen, the reasons of the Irish famine were so devastating and went for so long were quite complex. They included a natural disaster, existing economic weaknesses, and a slow and inadequate government response. The reasons for the latter issue are also complex. Confidence in the natural laws of the market and in the doctrine of laissez-faire, and the prevailing view that the poor were responsible for their own poverty can be seen as factors that contributed to government thinking at the time. A sense that the Irish were not truly part of the British nation, and the idea that the famine was an act of divine providence, as are also evident at times. But 1851, there was a sense that the Irish problem had been resolved. Now that the civils of Irish overpopulation had been overcome, Ireland would become a more productive and prosperous part of the United Kingdom, feeded into anti-Victorian sense of confidence and optimism that he considered in Unit 9. However, the famine had a long-lasting legacy. It changed the profile of the Irish society and that of many cities in Britain, the British Empire and the USA. A substantial Irish diaspora had been created, with many of its members coming to support a new, more violent form of Irish nationalism that would make itself felt in the late 1860s. Meanwhile, the famine had also raised important questions about the Irish land tenure systems, landlords, tenant rights, and land ownership in Ireland. Significantly, the Encumbered Estate Acts had seen the government intervene in the land market for the first time. This encouraged Ulster tenants to call for further state intervention and to ensure the customary right of free scale. It was enshrined in law. In the years that followed, calls grew for the right to be extended throughout land, with the addiction of fair rent and fixity of tenure. These three F's become the primary political aims of the Land League. As mass political movement emerged in the decades that followed the famine, you'll learn more about the Land League and ensuing land wars of the later 19th century in Block 3.